Hello, Max. How are you?
Hey, hey, Kamran, how are you? All well? How are
I'm
things?
good. Thank you. Thank you. It's good to see you here. And I would like to thank you for accepting my offer to take part in this interview. I will just ask you some questions regarding evidence-based marketing. So I just interested in your answers to this question because I know you have very much experience in marketing, in teaching, in evidence-based marketing. So I think your answers will be very more informative to our audience in Azerbaijan, in Baku. Actually, recently I just launched, as you know, evidence Brand and Evidence Institute in order to spread evidence-based marketing in Azerbaijan. So these distinctive voices interviews are part of my mission. So again, thank you for accepting my offer.
Well, thank you very much to you as well. Super excited to be here. Always one of my favorite topics to talk about evidence-based marketing. I know we have about 45 minutes an hour, you said, right? So I'll try not to ramble on for too long because, as you know from previous conversations we've had, all of a sudden, like hours can go by. Talking about all these exciting things that come up when we talk about evidence-based marketing, scientific principles in general. No, but thank you so much for inviting me. I'm super excited to be here and to speaking to you.
Thank you. Okay, Max. Firstly, I would like you to introduce yourself to our audience who may not know you in Azerbaijan.
Fantastic. Well, my name is, well, obviously Max, yeah, Max Stricker. In case people are wondering my accent, where's that from? I'm a born and bred Austrian, but I've been living in the UK for a very, very long time now. I think it's well over 20 years. And I started my career working in FMCG, so fast-moving consumer goods, working for the likes of Danone and L'Oreal in the UK before, I think it's been over 10 years ago, before I ventured over into the world of consulting and capability training, capability in improvement. And over the last 5 years, I've been running my own company called Ortum Consulting. We're basically like a marketing and capability consultancy, and we help our clients, organizations to build stronger brands and grow their sales. And what we focus on, and this is like tailing nicely back to our conversations that we've had in the past, is we do this by translating insights from brain, behavioral, and marketing science into very practical, simple, and evidence-based principles, but also frameworks that help our clients not only to build stronger brands, but also, which of course is very important, is drive long-term growth.
Thank you for introducing yourself, Max. I know you from Chartered Institute of Marketing, but I think this will be very interesting for our audience to know you better. So the first question I would like to ask you, which is the easiest one for you, I think that what does evidence
Easier than my name. Great. I like it.
yeah. Yeah. What does evidence-based marketing mean for you?
Oof. Wow. I think it's a great question, right? How do I keep this sort of like short without rambling on for an hour or two? I think when I think about evidence-based marketing, it almost like brings me back to when I first came across like marketing science, evidence-based marketing. In simple terms, for me, I would argue that it means not believing everything that people say. That we basically need to question things and not take everything as like at face value or jump at the latest shiny new thing that we might hear out there in some industry magazines or social media, LinkedIn forums and stuff like that. And I remember quite vividly still attending lots of industry events when I still was working in FMCG for the likes of L'Oreal, Danone, and so on, or like reading in industry magazines that mention something new, that a new hot topic, such as it was back then and still is, brand purpose, right? Or
Yeah.
I remember one of the very first hot topics I came across when I moved to the UK was about augmented reality, or then
Yeah.
later on the metaverse as well. Mark Zuckerberg talked about this a lot, and always he invested billions and billions of dollars into that. And what I felt a little bit back then, but a lot more later on, once I started to come across marketing science, was that marketers, it feels like they often jump on those new shiny things without necessarily properly investigating or questioning them. It almost feels a little bit like, oh, person so and so has talked about this on a stage at an event, a conference, so we better do this as well, right? We
Yeah.
have to do something. And it was only, I gotta be very honest and hold my hand up there, but it was only when I came across marketing science, evidence-based marketing, that I started to really think about those things a lot more consciously. And I started to question things as well. For example, what data, what evidence is supporting a point that's being made that I've just heard or listened to? Is it really unbiased data that is being shared? Has it been tested and validated by anyone else? Ideally by people who are impartial and not necessarily tested by people who sell the service or the product, and they sort of like just test it to make sure they have enough selling points, right?
Yeah.
So we have to be honest also that these are not necessarily easy questions to answer, right? They require us as the listeners, the audience, to like pause, step back, think, reflect for a moment, right? We need to spend time investigating and thinking about what have we just been told? How does it compare to my own experiences, the own data and evidence that I see? But I'm also a realist, having worked in this industry for a long time, that brand owners or marketers in general often don't have the time, right? You
Yes.
often have to be seen as like, oh, we gotta do something, right? We have to follow a trend, jump on the trend. We can't be seen as like falling behind, stopping, right? That's why I can understand, and again, I'll hold my hands up there as well. I can understand why people often jump on the bandwagon without much investigations or research first. And that's why I would say for me, when I reflect about evidence-based marketing, it really is about not believing everything that people say. It's about investigating what the data, the evidence, the research, whatever it might be, what that says, that unbiased data, ideally, what does that show us and how does that live up to what people are actually saying?
Yeah.
So for me, that's sort of like
Yes.
what
Yes.
I have in mind when I think about evidence-based marketing.
Thank you, Mac. Actually, the latest news about the shiny trends, which the companies or brands try to make their advertising with the artificial intelligence, but the OpenAI itself recently launched their advertising with the traditional way of making advertising. So it was, yeah, quite interesting. And we saw that we don't need to rush into the trends.
Yeah.
Thank you, Max, for very interesting answer. You just told about some kind of trends, shiny myths, and etc. For you, what are the two or three biggest myths you still hear from the marketeers, and what does the evidence say about it?
The biggest myths. There is one to two that come to mind straight away that I would say they've been around for a while and they don't seem to go away. So I'm not sure they're necessarily the most recent ones, but the two that I feel like that just haven't gone away. And one of them actually has gotten a lot more popular, and that is about loyalty, brand love, and purpose. Right. So let me talk about loyalty first, because I think that's really something that if I look back at my own career before I came across evidence-based marketing, I totally got that wrong. Absolutely, right? I had the wrong conclusions. It was only later on when I discovered marketing science, when I started to do my own data analysis to look into that, when actually my mind changed quite significantly about that. So what I've been saying a long time ago, but what I've heard over a long time as well from marketers, clients, and people I've worked with is that they often seem to talk about the need and the desire they often have, like recruiting more loyal customers or turn existing customers into long-term loyal ones, right? They need to love me and my brand. Ideally, they only buy myself, my brand, and no other one, right? It's so like the idea also of getting people to buy my brand just one more time in a given time period. Buy me one more time more often rather than, of course, a competitor or not buying me at all. So I would say might be, I don't think it's the only reason necessarily, but that's probably one of the reasons why we keep seeing loyalty programs being introduced by brands, right? Well, how do I increase my loyalty? The people love me and people just keep buying from me. Well, hey, loyalty program, right? Or there are specific campaigns out there, advertising campaigns, but also promotional campaigns that focus specifically on existing customers to, again, lock them in to make them more loyal and just get them to spend more money with my brand. But the interesting thing here really is when we look at the data, we actually see something very different. And
Hmm.
that for me, when I first came across this, it was a big moment. I was like, no way, right? No, for sure that can't be right. And I questioned it. I questioned what I heard. But then when I started to really investigate, I realized, okay, well, actually, maybe my assumptions were wrong because what we actually see when we look at the data, when we look at the evidence, is that loyalty is a function of brand size. And
Right.
if we focus like with our brand, like our marketing efforts, whether it's the products we have, the loyalty programs, the advertising, if we only focus on our existing customers to make them more loyal, to make them stay with us, what we are seeing in the data is brands actually don't tend to grow. I mean, yes, you can grow in the very short term, right? You lock them in for a very, very short period. But in the long term, loyalty is not something that's driving the growth. It's actually a function of the brand size. What we have seen in the evidence, and this is the really interesting thing, is that brands actually grow by recruiting more customers to their brand. So you need to reach more customers, get more to the brand. It's less about getting existing customers to spend more with you. So what we've seen in the data though is that first of all, like brands grow if they recruit more customers. But what interestingly we've also seen is that bigger brands have more loyalty, and maybe that's one of the reasons why people said, "Well, actually, I need to focus on loyalty to drive the growth of my brand." No, loyalty is actually it's like following the growth of a brand.
Yeah.
Why? Well, simply because as a brand recruits more customers, a brand also tends to be in more touch points, tends to be available at more touch points where people can buy it. If you think about a good old-fashioned physical product, you might be increasing your distribution from 2 retailers to maybe 3 or 4 retailers, or you're adding in an app or other digital platforms. So you have more distribution points, more points where people can buy your brand. But also, and that's very important to think about as well, as a brand grows, typically, obviously, you make more money and you have more money available to invest into advertising. So, what we are seeing basically is that bigger brands tend to have much stronger what's called physical availability, meaning they had a lot more touch points where they can be bought, but they also have much stronger mental availability, meaning they are more likely to come to mind. And why are they more likely to come to mind in a buying situation? Well, because they've been, for example, exposed to a lot more advertising, because the big brands spend a lot more on advertising than the smaller ones. So that is really what we've seen in the data, that actually bigger brands have more loyalty. Yes, absolutely. So your loyalty will go up. But if you say, I want to become a big brand by focusing on loyalty alone, it's probably not going to work because loyalty only goes up a little bit in the short term, but it's not a long-term driver. It's actually getting more people to your brand that is driving the growth of a brand. You have to make sure that your brand is available across more touch points where people can buy you, but also that you have stronger mental availability, stronger associations about your brand in the minds of your target audience. And if you make that happen, you will not only recruit more people, but also people will buy from you more often. Hence, loyalty goes up. If you're not available in a lot of different distribution points, then the chance of you being bought in every buying situation is probably very small, right? So
Yes.
I might buy you now, but I'm not going to buy you tomorrow simply because I'm at a different retailer, for example, and you're not stocked there. So I'm not going to buy you, I'll buy a competitor. So we really see that mental and physical availability are crucial if you want to grow our brands. We need to focus on that, getting into more touch points, making sure people have strong associations about our brand rather than saying, I need to focus on loyalty, I need to have a loyalty program, or just target my existing customers. So that's probably the myth that I would say has been around for a very long time, and I sort of like fell into the trap as well, thinking about we need to focus on our super loyal customers, the typical good old 80-20 rule comes to mind here. Like 20% of my customers account for 80% of my sales. I need to focus on them. They're so important, right? Well, if anyone agrees with that, then I argue or I challenge you, go out there and look at the data. Because I always, and I'm going to hold my hand up here, I always mention it. 80-20, 80-20, 80-20, Pareto, right?
Yes.
I never checked the numbers. But when I did, I was like, oh, it's not 80-20. It's more like, of course, depending on the category and industry, an average from what I've seen in all my analysis and the data that I've had access to is more like 20-60. And what that basically means is if you focus on your loyal customers, your 20% loyal customers who account for 60% of sales, you're ignoring 40% of your sales. I would argue no marketer in the world can afford ignoring them. And of course, I'm simplifying a little bit, right? So we need to make sure um, we focus on like growing the number of people buying us rather than just focusing on on the small number of people. And also there's this big assumption that those people will always, those 20% loyal customers will always stay with me. No, actually what we're seeing is they're dropping out quite regularly. So you need to like top it up again. So again, we need to go out there, need to make sure that we are available everywhere and we're being thought of by as many people as possible. So that's where again mental and physical availability come in. Yeah. So loyalty, I would say, is the first one that comes to mind. Um, you asked me about two or three, so I give you another
I,
one.
yes, the
Eh,
second.
the second one. So
Yeah.
purpose. It's again, it's something that's been around for a while, but I think I would, in a way, would say in sort of like the marketing science circle, if I can call it like that. It's one of those things that's recently has been discussed again, quite heavily, and I'll explain in a moment why. But when we hear about brand purpose, it's sometimes it feels like it's become like sort of this mantra for marketers that this is something we need to focus on. A brand needs to have a purpose. Without the strong brand purpose, I can't grow my brand. I need to have a purpose for people to buy my brand. But actually, when we look at research, whether it's research that's been carried out a few years ago or very, very recent research, hence why, like I would say, the debate has come up again in the marketing science circles. There's research from the Ehrenberg Bass Institute. It's an academic institution in Australia. And actually, when they looked at the purpose, they found something very different. What they basically found, and they looked at different markets such as the US, the UK, and Australia. They looked at 14 famous brands and they looked into the purpose-driven strategies. And what did they find? Well, they actually found that on average, only about, I think it was 18-20% of consumers were aware of a brand's stated purpose. And so like when you look into this in more detail and when you sort of like take out the guessing factor, because people will of course guess as well, the true like awareness of what the brand purpose is often closer to like 10%, even for big names they're always it's like being held up as the poster child
Yeah.
for purpose, such as Patagonia, which I'm sure you know of, or Nike as well, brands that sort of everyone knows of that, and we all think and know that they are sort of purpose driven. Even those brands had surprisingly low recognition among consumers. So we often say like we need to have a brand purpose, we need to focus on that, we need to communicate that so that people buy us and buy us because we have a great brand purpose. But the evidence says like, well, actually people don't seem to know it. And so it was really interesting to see this research coming out from the Ehrenberg Bass Institute. And I think it was 2 or 3 years ago at Autumn, we did some research into this as well. And I'm just going to be very honest, our research wasn't anywhere near as scientific and as comprehensive as the one from Ehrenberg Bass. But we've also wanted to look into this because we were quite intrigued by this. And we've done an online survey with several hundreds, I think it was like 700 people in total. And what we've done was we've showed them the brand purpose of a brand and then said to them, hey, what do you think is the brand that this belongs to? And again, we've not used small brands, we've used big ones, like again, the likes of Coca-Cola's in the world. So we've showed them the brand purpose and then said, what's the brand? So you take a guess, Cameron. How many people do you think got the answer correct? How many people knew what that brand purpose belongs to?
I think 15% of
15%.
yeah.
Not bad, not bad. Actually, it was less than 5% that we had.
Oh, wow.
Again, I mean, very similar in a way to what the Ehrenberg Bass Institute found, that not many people actually can correctly associate the brand purpose to a brand. And if we think about this for a moment, that then also makes you think about, like, okay, well, what role does brand purpose then actually have in the decision hierarchy of a consumer? And if we look into other research that again investigated that in more detail, what we can see is that brand purpose is not very high as a decision factor. That the usual, not so, excuse my language, not so sexy things are like, hey, what's the price? What's the quality? Is it the right pack format for me? Right? Those things are much more important. Purpose is much, much lower down. So my point is, and I want to be very careful with this, my point is that having a purpose alone is not enough to build a strong brand and grow sales. It's basically wishful thinking. Consumers don't seem to notice it. And also, to be really frank, most of the time they just don't care about it, right?
Yeah.
They don't think about brand as much as we do. But I do think purpose has a role. It might not necessarily be like that holy grail that gets consumers to buy my brand and give me that strong growth. I do think, and this is less evidence-based, I'm going to be very honest, less evidence-based, more like my own experience from my own time in FMCG, but also conversations I've had over the years with marketers, is that purpose can be super relevant, but relevant for, I would argue, internal purposes. For example, by guiding our decision making, right? Or by inspiring the team, or like helping recruit really great talent to the organization, to the brand, who might be really excited about the purpose that we help, and maybe can also like sort of shape the company culture as well. So I think for the internal purposes, yes, fantastic. I think it can really make a big difference, but it doesn't automatically translate into consumer choice. And maybe worthwhile giving you a couple of examples. I used to work, as I said earlier, I used to work for Danone, the yogurt company. And the company had a very clear and very strong purpose, but don't ask me what it was. I don't remember now. It was a very simple one. I still don't remember.
Okay.
But a very clear, strong purpose, right? And to be really honest, I found it super exciting working for a company where it's not just about profits. The CEO, like all the CEOs that I've lived through at my time there, they always talked about purpose as well, the good things the company is going to do. And it wasn't just talk. We actually, and this is what I loved, what we actually here in the UK, in London, where our head office was, we actually did something. We, for example, went out to the community. And I remember, I think one day we helped out in a local school which is painting there, or the team was going to clear up rubbish, I think, from riverbeds and parks and things like that. So it was really great to see that it wasn't all about profit. We actually did something really great as well, which came from that idea that we need to live and breathe our purpose as well. But I never for a moment, while I was at Danone, never for a moment did I feel that consumers were buying us because of that. I always felt it was an internal driver. And that brings me sort of like on to my second example, which is based on a conversation I've had with a marketer. I think it was a year or two ago, and I had someone on a workshop where we touched on purpose. So it wasn't about purpose itself, but we touched on the topic. And I basically asked during the session, like, what role purpose played in their organization. And that marketer made a super, super interesting comment to me. And then she said, well, Max, it plays a massive role in my organization. So I was like,
Really?
okay. Yeah, I was like, okay, tell me a little bit more, right? And she's like, yeah, it plays a massive role because it shapes our decisions. From memory, don't quote me on that. Their purpose was around using sustainable ingredients and in the products. So they had organic products, but also using sustainable packaging. And what she said to me was that, hey, well, we use our purpose to help us decide what's like ingredients do we going to use, what's the packaging that we're going to use. So everything needs to be sort of like around the environment, being sustainable and things like that. She was very clear about this. She's like, it's our North Star. We don't communicate it, but it's our North Star internally that helps us make decisions. It guides what we do. And I quite like that, because rather than just focus on like, oh, how do we find the best balance between quality and price, they use the purpose as their North Star to say, okay, we need to consider the sustainable side of things as well. Yes, there might be maybe a better quality packaging or cheaper packaging, but actually it's not as environmentally friendly, it's not as sustainable. So we're going to do something else because, again, our purpose is driving us in that direction. So again, purpose for me, one of those big topics that's been around for some time, it feels like it comes and goes. Is purpose an important growth driver in terms of growth of sales for brand? Haven't seen any evidence of that, right? It really doesn't play a big role in consumers' decision-making process. However, can it be very important internally to motivate the team, galvanize everyone behind it? Yes, absolutely. So that's sort of like would be my take on purpose. I'm a bit critical, but I do think it has an important role as well.
Thank you, Max. It was really, really interesting to know about the two biggest myths you think that about loyalty and brand purpose. And we just talked about the some kind of associations building with the brand purpose. I think it could be difficult for the brands to build associations with the brand purpose. I saw you just talking about associative attention so much in your social media, and a couple of I think the it was last year you published an article about associative attention in I think the
Work.
work. I asked you to send me this article, and I read it, and that article really impressed me. So I would like you to just talk about this associative attention. What's it, and how does this fit into the evidence-based marketing?
All right. Oof, might take me a while there. It's one of my favorite topics at the moment. So, well, thank you for bringing it up, and glad to hear you liked the article. Watch the space. There's more to come on this one. Well, if you think about marketing, at its core, marketing really is about like three things: how people notice, how they remember, and how they choose subsequently a brand when they're in a buying or decision-making moment. And the Associative Attention Framework is all about understanding that process and making it better. Because the thing is, when people make decisions, they don't sit down and carefully weigh up all the different options in front of them, whether it's in a supermarket, like where I was shopping this morning, right, in front of like hundreds or thousands of products, or the same thing is true when you are online shopping, whether it's in your phone, your laptop, tablet, and so on. We don't think about everything in detail. We don't weigh up the pros and cons. What we tend to do in those buying situations is that we rely on associations, right? Which are basically mental shortcuts that we have. And when I say we as consumers, we have to think about as consumers, not as marketers from it. I mean, so we as consumers rely on those associations. And those associations, those mental shortcuts, we built up over time. And as a consumer, our attention naturally goes to what feels so like familiar, relevant to us, and we're more likely to buy something that that brand comes to mind, or that sounds familiar. I think I've seen that before, or yeah, actually that brand is exactly what I need in that buying situation. And the framework, the Associative Attention Framework, basically brings those two forces together: the association and the attention, and together it basically explains how to build a strong brand, a brand that is not just strong, but a brand that really grows in terms of sales as well. It's about combining the what a brand stands for, basically the association, the mental associations, with the how. How do I, as a marketer, as a brand owner, how do I draw attention to these associations? Yeah. So in other words, it doesn't just tell you what drives growth. The framework also shows you how to make that growth happen. So it looks at the what and the how of brand building and brand growth. And at the heart of this framework, we have four core pillars, which I'm sure might sound very familiar to you. The first one is distinctive brand asset. These are basically, again, those cues, those mental associations that make a brand recognizable and memorable. That can be a distinctive logo like the Nike ticks, or colors like the Google colors that we have, or shapes. If you think about the Toblerone triangle shape in the
Yeah.
packaging that they have, which everyone always buys at the airport and stuff like that. But it can also be the tone of voice as well, or anything sonic, auditory, this distinctive voice that people have as well, or a jingle. Anything that basically is strongly associated to the brand. So when you hear it, see it, but even when you like smell it from a sensory point of view, you think about that brand. So distinctive brand assets are one of the four pillars. The second pillar are also around associations. These are the category entry points. These are basically the situations, needs, the contexts that basically trigger the consideration of a category and hopefully subsequently your brand. For example, it's hot outside. I feel quite hot. I need to cool down. What can I do to cool down? Well, I have a cold drink. What cold drink brand comes to mind? Or could be ice cream as well. So it's basically those situations, needs, the context, the triggers that come to mind when we are in a buying situation. And the third one is about creative execution. This is basically now when we look at the how do I get attention to build those associations in people's minds? And creative execution is really about grabbing the attention through, for example, our advertising that we have, whether it's a good old-fashioned TV or out-of-home magazine advertising, but also if it's social media advertising when you scroll through it on your phone. But creative execution is not just about advertising, and that's something to really clarify here. Creative execution can also be about your physical product, for example. Like I said earlier about Tobler on the triangle, right? You
Yes.
also want to stand out at the physical touch point where your product is being bought. But likewise, let's say you are an independent coffee chain and you're on a high street. You want to make sure that you stand out, that you can be found very easily. That you're not just like hidden and blend in to the rest of the high street, and it's very easy to just walk past. So creative execution is really all about like grabbing attention. And then fourth and the last point, we have media mastery, which is also in the bucket of like how do I get attention? And media mastery is basically all about ensuring that our brand reaches our target audience at the right moments through the right channels where they are to really help get the attention and strengthen those mental associations that our brand comes to mind. And what's very important when we think about media is to not just think about, okay, where are my customers? And we focus on that. Of course, that is important. But what I think what we often forget is that we also need to think about media in combination with what's the message, the association I want to build, right?
Yeah.
If we talk about a Snickers chocolate bar, for example, most people in the world will know what Snickers is, and
Yes.
you just need to see an ad for a fraction of a moment in whatever channel they use, and it's fine. But if you're a new brand or a brand that's not very well known, you probably need a bit more time. So your creative execution needs to work a little bit harder to get you that extra processing time and attention time, but also your media channel as well. And this has been quite interesting because particularly the last 2, maybe 3 years, a lot of research has come out in this area that tells us more about like what channels give you higher attention versus others. And we need to think about this as well, because if you have a difficult message to communicate, using a social media channel probably is not great, because what do we do in a social media? We just scroll through it, right?
Yes. Yes.
We don't have attention for long. So if it's something new or more complicated message to talk about, maybe pick a channel where people just spend this fraction longer. That gives you a bigger chance to actually build those associations that you need. So associative attention really is about combining the what and the how, and it has those 4 pillars underneath it. And when these 4 pillars work together, a brand becomes easier to notice, easier to think of, and ultimately then, if you've built stronger mental associations, the easier and more likely choice, increasing the likelihood of you are being thought of. And if you're being thought of, it's not a guarantee, but you've increased the odds of your brand actually being the chosen one. So the important thing here also is that if we think about associative framework, associative attention as a framework, it's not a static model. It's actually a living cycle. And that's something really interesting that makes it very practical for brand owners, because you can use it to like as this continuous loop where you start off by doing an audit to understand how am I performing against the what and the how in those 4 sub pillars in terms of my existing brand efforts, the associations I focus on, how well I'm doing in terms of building those associations. But then you use those findings from the audit and say, okay, how can I improve, right? And here we need to really think about what's like the I often say that you need to think about the short-term things you can do, but also have a longer-term plan, right? Because we can't just say, hey, I need to build 50 new associations in people's minds. Well, yes, if you that's what you want to do, fine, but you're not going to do this overnight,
Yeah.
right? Building associations is expensive and takes a long time, takes also a lot of consistency. So I often say to clients, like, start off with like a short-term priority list, the things that you want to focus on now, and then have a plan to see how can we increase that over time. Because you also need to think about, do I actually have the resources to build more associations, right? To link them to my brand. So you do your audit, then you do your planning. And this is where you really need to take your time and also ideally work with different internal and external stakeholders, for example, agency partners that you have involved. And then you execute your plan, your strategy, right? And then, of course, we need to measure it and see, okay, are we improving in the four areas of the framework, the four pillars of the framework? We need to gather feedback as well, see what's working, what's not working. But also, and that's important, it's not just about what I do as a brand owner. What about my competitors? What are they doing? What they are doing also has an impact on the way my brand's being seen, and how quickly and how strongly I can build those associations in the minds of my target audience. So we need to audit again. And that's why I'm saying it's sort of like this continuous loop where you look at an audit first, where am I, what's going on? Then you plan, execute, measure, audit again, and you just keep evolving as you go along, but always having this long-term strategic outlook in terms of like what associations do I want to build. And if you focus on this as a continuous learning cycle, as a loop, the brand will strengthen over time and you will build stronger mental associations. And if you have stronger mental associations, that means you're more likely to be thought of or easier to recognize. Then ultimately you will increase sales of your brand.
Oh, that's quite interesting. Actually, as I said just before the question, that I've read about the article, but it's the first time for me listening about associative attention just from you. You just combined distinctive assets, category and try points with execution and media mastery in order to build strong mental associations. I think this will be very informative framework for our audience in Azerbaijan. So we talked about, you mentioned just one brand, sneakers. What's your favorite case study regarding this associative attention?
Um, I have to think about this for a moment because I don't want to use one of those big examples that people then think like, oh yeah, of course Max mentions one of those big brands, but actually my brand is very small. So let me think about this for a moment. But actually, the one thing, because you said it might be quite useful, the one thing it might be worthwhile just like emphasizing is that the framework itself actually isn't just theory, right? The framework is based on science, on scientific principles, as you mentioned a moment ago, like category entry points and distinctive brand assets, for example. But what's super cool, and we are so excited about this, and that's why I said earlier, Kamran, watch the space, there's more coming out. The framework has actually, we've literally just finished this a week ago. It was tested in collaboration with the Cranfield School of Management here in the UK. So they're very prestigious, very well-known university, one of the leading universities in the UK. And what the team at the Cranfield University have done is they carried out an in-depth literature review and also interviewed both practitioners and consumers. And what they found, Cameron, that was super exciting, right?
Really?
Because they basically validated that the associative attention framework and its four pillars really hold up, both academically, right? So it's really underpinned with science and research, but also it holds up, and that's the important point as well, in real world marketing situations. And that's like what practitioners have fed back. So for us, this is super exciting. We haven't published the findings yet because you're the first one actually who was finding out about this. We've literally just had the results coming out last week. So it's exciting because it confirms not just the theory behind the framework, that it's sound, but also that the framework is really applicable, which we've always felt and known in the real world. But this time it's been tested in an unbiased way. It's not just like, hey, believe what Max is saying about his own framework. Of course, I would say that, right?
Yeah.
We actually had a third party, unbiased testing it, right? So the framework really is evidence based. But I also want to say, and I think it's important for people to know this, the Associative Attention Framework doesn't replace existing research, right? It basically built on it. It draws from, as you've said earlier, it draws from research carried out by, for example, the Ehrenberg Bass Institute, the one I mentioned earlier in Australia, but also learnings from behavioral science and attention research as well. But crucially, what it does, rather than looking at all those bits and pieces in isolation, what the framework does, it's organizing all this evidence into a practical, actionable structure, into a framework that marketers can actually use. And for me, that's the part that really, really is exciting, that it is practical. And in practice, this makes it both a diagnostic tool, but also makes it directional. Diagnostic meaning that it basically helps you as the brand owner identify where your brand is like doing well, not so well, so you can do your plan, your plan around this. For example, be this using associations that are easily confused with customers, and you now understand that, and you need to maybe make some tweaks to pull away from that to have more clarity. Or maybe you've learned in the diagnostic that, oh yeah, we spend a lot of money on advertising, but actually it's not building strong associations because we're not consistent. We're not doing well in terms of grabbing attention or making it clear who it is that's communicating, or what the product, the service is that we are advertising. So it really is that diagnostic, coming back to what I said earlier. But it also gives out direction, and then being directional basically means that once you have the output of the diagnostic, like the audit I said earlier, you can really then understand, sorry, not understand, but yes, understand, identify what are the things that I want to focus on, right? What are the things I need to do to strengthen my brand building effort. So by following that, so like that cycle of audit, planning, execution, measurement, feedback I mentioned earlier, right? As a brand owner, you constantly refine your approach, and you grow your brand stronger over time. So ultimately, basically, associative attention is about making brand building both scientific but also practical. Scientific in a sense, like, yes, it is rigorous. We know that, but we've known that before, but now it's been tested and validated. But it's also practical as well. It's not just like some difficult to understand things where people have to read tons and tons of research papers that typically don't make any sense. So our framework really is connecting the dots between that, what you want to be known for, and the associations you want to build as a brand owner. When how do I build those associations? Because I can't do one or the other. I need to do both. I need to get both right. If I know what associations I want to focus on, but I'm not doing a great job in building those associations in people's minds, they're not going to buy my brand. So it's really exciting times for us, and there's going to be more news coming out about that in due course. We're still writing, do the write up, and we'll be publishing about this as well.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just wanted, sorry, I didn't answer your question. I'll come back to this in a moment, but I just wanted to link that back, because I'm conscious you asked me earlier about like evidence-based marketing, what it means for me, and I talked about questioning things, and then Max is talking about his own framework there, right? So it has been tested, and there will be more tests that we're going to do going forward. Yeah, you asked me about an example, right?
Yeah.
Case study. Yeah, I mean, as I said, I don't want to talk about big established brands of the likes of like Nike and stuff like that, right? I used to do this, and then people looked at me, it was like, yeah, great, thanks, Max, for talking about a brand that is like millions or billions of dollars in terms of advertising brand spend, and a brand that's been around for decades. Thanks, Max. My company is a lot smaller, right? And by the way, I have $10,000 as my annual budget. What can I do with this, right? So what I want to do is, I don't want to give you an example of a big brand. I think we know a lot of those big ones, like Nike do a great job, Coca-Cola do a great job. But I want to talk to you about a brand that I know of. I wouldn't say I know it really well, but I've been sort of like observing it a little bit for some time now, what they are doing. And I would say they're really executing associative attention quite well. And I have to be honest, they don't know about it. They just use the principles intuitively, which is really exciting to see. So it's a British brand. So I'm conscious not everyone will know it, but you might want to look it up. The brand is called Perfect Ted, and it's basically a matcha, a green tea brand. And the brand is growing super quickly in the UK. It also went on Dragon's Den. It's one of those reality shows, and got investment from some some super successful entrepreneurs. And I would argue that Perfect 10 is doing a really great job in like building strong associations and building a strong brand. So what are they doing? The brand really focuses on getting attention. For example, they have a really interesting founder story, given they were on this reality show Dragon's Den. And that the founder story regularly gets communicated and leveraged in their communications because it's something that sort of is interesting. The people want to know more about it. How was it in Dragon's Den, right? How was your experience? Or the investor that they have now. Or also, and this is super hilarious, or by carrying out stunts, such as the head of marketing, who was one of my delegates once in a workshop a few years ago. The head of marketing impersonated Sabrina Carpenter, I think it was. The impersonation was that Sabrina Carpenter went into a supermarket to buy their matcha brand, their Perfect Dead. And they made a big deal around this, right? They really drove a lot of traffic to it. And I think at that stage when I checked it, they had over 2 million views on TikTok. They're a small brand, right? Have you heard of the brand, Perfect Dead?
No. Well, I know
No.
what is matcha, what is green tea they are selling with the mix of the milk, I think so.
Yeah, well, I don't know about the milk part. I'm not a matcha drinker. I'm good old-fashioned coffee. Or don't tell Perfect Ted I said that. But anyway, for me, it's a really great example of brand building on a shoestring budget and a brand really working so hard in terms of getting attention. But the great thing is, it's not just attention for attention's sake. And that's important because very often brand owners say to me, yeah, Max, we focus on getting attention. And then I look at what they do. I'm like, yeah, but how is that attention you're getting building associations? It doesn't very often, or it doesn't do a great job. And I think Perfect Dead, when I look at their communications, the ones that I've seen, they're great. It's not just attention for attention's sake, it's attention that focuses on building associations. They have a really clear focus on linking themselves, for example, to, I think they call it matcha and healthy energy, right? I would argue, and I haven't done any research in this industry, but I would argue that's probably a very relevant association for their consumers. Maybe a category entry point, like, oh, I'm feeling a bit down. I want some energy, but I want something healthy. I don't want, sorry, Red Bull, my Austrian brand. It's probably not as healthy, right? So matcha, yes, has a lot of health connotations. So really strongly linking the brand to that, and they're doing a great job on that. And what they've done in a recent activity, which I thought was very clever, they did a really great job in linking the brand to this association of healthy energy or needing energy.
Yeah.
You might have that every now and then as well. In the UK, we've had recently a tube strike in London. So I'm from
Yeah.
London. And you can imagine the tube doesn't work. Oh boy, not so fun getting to work, right? So not everyone can work from home, right? So it's the few public buses that ran, they were overcrowded. Driving was impossible as well. So what do a lot of people do? They cycle. And in London, don't know about back here, in London, we have a lot of like cycles that you can hire from different companies, right?
Yeah.
And one of those companies is called Lime Cycles, and they have green cycles. And what they've basically done was when people couldn't take the tube to work and they were just hiring those cycles to commute to and from work, they basically put some of the tea sachet, I think it was a sachet or so, with a leaflet into the basket. So all of those cycles have a basket into the baskets of the cycle. And I thought it was just really, really clever because that's sort of like when you think about, I need energy, right? I might want to need something healthy as well. And they really used a great media touch point to support the message that they want want to communicate. So, and finally, and I think this is the most interesting part. And if you Google the brand and check out what they do, you will see what I mean. They are really unapologetic in using the green color. If you go on their social media feed or if you just Google Perfect Ted, you'll see the green color everywhere, whether it's in the advertising they do or sometimes they hand out samples, they wear those green boiler suits. You always, always see them. And they really genuinely are unapologetic about that. They're building this into a very strong, distinctive brand asset. Yeah. So if you don't know the brand, and I assume probably most of your audience don't, just please do have a quick look. Look at their social media posts. You will see how single-minded they are on that color. It really is left, right, center to everything that they do. Be this in their product packaging, at the point of sale material as well, when you go in the supermarket to buy that, be it in their communications, and even, and that again comes back to that founder story, when the founders got married, well, the green color even made an appearance at the wedding. So have you ever seen a wedding where green is a big color? Well, they've had that. I don't think the bride wore a green dress. I think that didn't go that far, but green was very prominent at the wedding as well, apparently. So it's really like single-minded communication, focusing on grabbing attention. So for me, I think Perfect Ted are really doing a great job. A small brand on what I understand is a shoestring budget, really focusing, grabbing attention and drawing the attention to these associations that they want to build. For example, that green color and that matcha is healthy energy. So for me, really well done. Great example of associative attention in action.
Oh, that's great example, Max. Thank you. Even though I don't know this brand, I have never heard about it, but I will check it on internet and I will see how this applies to this framework. Again, thank you for great example and your thorough explaining about the associative attention. I think this will be also very informative for our audience. In order to finish our interview, I have my last question for you. Uh, what do you think? What's one habit what's one habit listeners can start this week in order to become more evidence-based?
A habit, a habit someone can start straight away to be more evidence-based. Um, I, I love this. I love this question. But let me try and give a concise answer on that one. Um, I would go back to like what you've asked me earlier on. When sorry, at the beginning of a conversation, I think you've asked me about like what evidence-based marketing means for me or something like that,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Yeah, yeah. So I would say if you want to be an evidence-based marketer, be more critical. And as I said earlier, like don't accept things at face value. Ask questions, be curious. Ask to see, where possible, of course, to see the evidence behind claims. But don't just, and I think that's important as well, don't just ask for the data. Maybe try where you can, of course, dig deeper, right? Maybe ask where the data is coming from. Check the source, but also if it's applicable to whatever you're looking at. It's like if it's like a survey or interviews that were carried out, check what questions were asked in the research. Yeah, it will give you an understanding. And like, is it robust research with a large sample size, or was it very selective? Right? Were the questions unbiased and not leading? Or also check how was the data? How was it interpreted? Right? Would other people come to the same conclusion? I mean, it happens, right? Like you and I, Cameron, we look at the same set of data, and you and I have different ideas. We have
Yeah.
different interpretations, right? So look at that, right? I'm not saying people like interpret things incorrectly on purpose, but sometimes we just have different point of views based on our own experiences. So I would say really check those kind of things. Check also if what someone claims has been confirmed by other parties as well. Like as I said earlier, so I'm glad you asked me about evidence based link of the Associative Attention Framework. Yes, it's not just like what Max thought about. It has been validated, right? So has other parties looked into this as well? Because every now and then, I would say I come across some typically articles, right, that reference research that, oh, wow, that looks super interesting, right? But when you dig, often it doesn't have to be a lot of digging. Just when you just dig a little bit deeper, for example, by checking the questions that were asked in the research, oops, it becomes clear that maybe the findings are not so reliable because they were asking leading questions, or it's like, yeah, of course people would answer like that, right? So someone once said to me, who was from the research industry, is like, I can get you any answer you want, right? What answer do you want? I'll ask the question the way that I can get it. And back then it was a bit of a joke, right? But I think for me, I will never forget that now because when I look at stuff, sometimes I can really see like, oh wow, yeah, people really have asked questions in a biased way. And by the way, I'm not an expert. I don't know how to ask the best questions and how to do research in a perfect way. But I think I've got a bit of experience understanding like what to watch out for to understand whether something is biased, where you then have to maybe reflect a little bit more on it and don't take it as face value. But I would also say, and this is a bit of a trickier one though, I would also say the same thing is true when maybe you speak to people, very often someone internally, right? And maybe you talk about, okay, what do we need to do to grow our brand, right? Or how do we improve our advertising? Like let's say our social media ad that we've just gotten back from the agency. What do you think we need to do, right? We have to be careful because we all have opinions, right? You and I have opinions. We look at the same thing and we have different ideas. So when someone shares their suggestion with you of what to do, for example, how to grow the brand or how to improve an ad, don't just accept the suggestion. Yeah, I would generally say in an appropriate way, don't challenge them, don't be confrontational, right? Ask some questions, find out what their suggestions are they based on. Yeah, is it just an opinion? Or is it backed up by maybe some data, some analysis that they've done, right? Or have they maybe seen or heard this somewhere else? And if that's the case, okay, has that been investigated? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would argue if you do this, if you ask people to sort of like in a gentle way, yeah, again, not fighting, not confrontational, in a gentle way, if you ask them to sort of like justify, to explain why they're saying that, I think you'll be surprised. You'll be surprised to find out how many times people actually struggle to support their suggestions. It's very often just a gut feeling, right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying a gut feeling is always wrong, absolutely not. But we have to be very careful with this. It's a lot better if you keep it objective, if you look at the data, we look at the evidence. And of course, and sorry for saying that, same thing is true about your own opinions as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very easy to say, oh, I criticize you, I challenge you, but what about your own opinions that you've built up over times, right? Make sure that your view of, for example, how to do something is also backed up by data, yeah, by evidence. And if you can't explain yourself, yeah, then maybe do some checking and be very open-minded of changing your opinions. And maybe to close the loop to your earlier question about my view on evidence-based marketing, and when I talked about how I came across it, it wasn't easy
Yeah.
because if you find out that actually some of the things that you've been talking about for a long time, some of the things that you thought worked well, actually might just be not true or might just be by pure luck, then it's not a great feeling, right? It was definitely, I gotta be very honest, the whole band up, it wasn't easy for me. I had to swallow my pride and ego quite a lot to say like, wow, maybe I wasn't right. Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe I did make mistakes without realizing it. Yeah, and that's when I really got so interested, and I was lucky with all the client work that I could do a lot of analysis into that evidence-based world of, and it just like gave me more confirmation that okay, we can't just take things at face value. We have to question our things, and we have to be open-minded to changing our own opinions as well. So basically, if you want to be an evidence-based marketer, be critical, be curious. Don't just accept someone's or your own opinion, right? Test it. Yeah, be curious.
Thank you, Max. That was great to hear about being evidence-based marketing. It was a very honor for me to talk to you, to interview you in this episode of Distinctive Voices. Thank you for taking time. Thank you for accepting my offer to take part in this interview. Then, do you have anything to say?
Now, I just want to say thank you so much again. I'm super excited and very grateful that you've invited myself to talk about evidence-based marketing. I think some really good questions that really made me think, I have to be honest, about what is evidence-based marketing or what's a piece of advice. I haven't heard that one yet. So very good. No, I've really enjoyed it. It's been super interesting. I mean, you and I have talked for a few years now, right? All those things, evidence-based marketing. And it's just great to share it with hopefully a wider audience around it. I think it's a super, super exciting topic, but also, as you know, Cameron, it can be a rabbit hole as well, where you just, once you are hooked, you just go down that rabbit hole. And there's so much exciting things to learn about it. No, but thank you so much for having us. I hope your listeners, your viewers found it really useful. I wish you all the best with the future podcasts.
Thank you, Max. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a nice
Have a
day.
great
See
day.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.